we get started here with Journey 2, the good news is that Journey 2 uses a whole different set of muscles than Journey 1, all right? So Journey 1 is really about articulating your identity, and if you're someone who likes to dig deep into your soul and into your heart, you love Journey 1 because, especially as you see other people begin to do that, you love to watch the way that they meet God in the midst of their life drifts and their narrative as they begin to understand their name. But to be honest with you, it's a soul searching kind of work. Journey 2 is for all the hands people in the room. Journey 2 is for all the people who say, you know what? I've done enough soul searching in my life, but now I need to put this into practice. All right, so it's a totally different set of it's a totally different kind of journey, and it's a totally different set of muscles that we're going to use. Now, as we get started, you can go ahead and turn in your book into Journey 2. Let's look at page 2 right now. So we're going to look at the page 2, where we begin to give you this idea that, hey, the journey that you're on, the first one's about articulating your identity, the second one's about activating your calling, the third is about advancing your future. And here in Journey 2, Session 1, what we're going to do is we're going to fill out the rest of the life frame, of the personal vision frame, throughout this journey. You're going to get your life steps and your life score. So remember, we have your life call, your life core, your life steps, and your life score. And then we're going to be able to build out a life plan to go along with that. All of that is part of Journey 2. Now, as we think about activating your calling, Journey 2 is bookended by two kinds of confessions. The first confession is around the ideas of what is. We're just going to begin to look at our life and begin to assess our life as it is. The second confession is going to be around what will be. It's going to be around this idea of, okay, this is the way that I want my life to go, and we're going to have a 3-year plan that is applicable at both the 3-year level, the 1-year level, the 90-day level, and the everyday level. We're going to be able to apply that. Now, when we think about confession in the Bible, there are two kinds of confession. There's a kind of negative confession. We talk about a confession of sin. It's just a confession of what is. It's knowing that we're loved, and because we're loved, we can just go to God and say, I don't have to hide anything. I can just be honest about what the what is, because there's nothing I can do to make you love me anymore. There's nothing I can do to make you love me any less, so I can just be honest about the what is. The second kind of confession that we make in the Bible, though, is a confession of faith, right? So it's not just a confession of sin. People who only are confessing what is are only doing half the confession, because the other confession is we make a confession of faith, that in the midst of what is, because of Christ, I can believe that what is doesn't have to stay what is, but what is can be changed to what could be and eventually to what will be. And so we make a confession of faith that is rooted in the person of Christ. When we think about doing that, the first exercise that we're going to do is a confession of what is. We're just going to take stock of our life. We're going to use 4 helpful questions from Tom Patterson to ask what's working, what's broken, what's confused, what's missing in our life. We're just going to be asking those questions. We're going to give you an exercise here to do in just a second. And the great thing about this is that we can just be honest, because we're going to be about making a life. Now, here's the deal. When we think about making a life, I want you to put on your designer thinking hat, meaning this. A lot of times when we think about, creating a life plan, we start thinking like an architect. We've got to have a blueprint, and that blueprint's never going to change. We build a building on that blueprint. We want to make it immovable. That's not what we're trying to build here. We want to think as a designer. And a designer, and by the way, there's a great book on this called Designing Your Life. If you haven't got that, it's a great book. 2 Stanford professors just have led, lots of people through a design process to design their life. There's lots of carryover between what we do here in Unique and what they're doing. But one of the things that they say is key is teaching their students to think as a designer, which means this, that instead of just thinking like an architect, you think in regard to we're building a prototype here. So we're going to be building a prototype of the life that you've just articulated that God said you're called to do and who you're called to be. And now we're going to start building a prototype, and we're going to try that prototype out. We're going to do some assessment and adjustment. And the great news is that the process that we're inviting you into, after you do assessment and adjustment, you come back, you make those assessment adjustments, you build another prototype, and you put that into practice, and you see, okay, what's good about this, what's bad about this. You come back, you build another prototype, and you continue to prototype your life toward more and more alliance with who God's created you to be. So what you're going to see in this process here is that we're going to start just by declaring where your life is currently at. And then we're going to start giving you the tools to shape where your life is at to where you sense God is actually designing it to be. All right? So there's always a gap between those two things, where it's at, where God wants it to be. And we're going to get better and better at shaping our life more into the way that God wants it to be. So here is the exercise that we're going to work on. If you have your text there, just turn to page 3, and you see that we're giving you a grid to begin to fill out that creates a cross-section of two things. It takes a look at your life in regard to the 5 domains of your life. Now, most people in the past have, when they look to assess their life, taken a look at really 5 domains in which their life is lived. Now, we're not going to hang there very long because Will and I believe that there's actually a better way to take stock of your life today and to build your life out, because domains were for a very spacious world, and we live in a much more integrated world. But just to get us started, we're going to start with the domains, and then we're going to transition from that into what we'll call storylines. It'll be a little more integrated approach. But in order just to take stock of your life, the 5 domains that people talk about in regard to life are your personal life. So who you are as a person and your kind of individual nature of your life. Your family, meaning your immediate family and the way that you guys are doing life together. Your faith, so your kind of spiritual life. Your vocation, your job. And then finally, your community. And here's what we want to ask. We want to take Patterson's 4 questions, and we want to go to every domain of life and ask these 4 questions. What's right? Or sometimes I say, what's working? What's going good? What can we celebrate? See this as just a column of thankfulness and thanksgiving in your life. Some of us are perfectionists, and we never think that anything's working. And if you never really celebrate what's working in your life, you'll never actually be a gracious person. You'll never be grateful. You'll never be thankful, because you'll never get anything into that column, and you'll never have anything to thank God for. So this is just a column where you can just celebrate what's working in all of these domains. Second one is what's wrong. First column is what's right. Second column is what's wrong. Or sometimes I say what's broken. This is just the places for us to just identify, you know what? Life's not perfect. There are things that aren't going well, and I want to be able to name that. I want to be able to not have to hide that. Just say, hey, here's what's broken in regard to my personal life, my family life, my faith, my vocation, my community. It's just a part of the world that we live in. Number 3 is what's confused. And number 4 is what's missing. Now, I love these last 2 columns. I love them both personally, and I also love them when I do organizational consulting, because the tendency for most people is for them just to have 2 columns: what's working and what's broken, what's right and what's wrong. But I love these last 2 columns because they actually nuance things in our life that we have a tendency sometimes to just put into the what's wrong column or what's broken column. It might not be that it's actually broken or wrong. It could be confused, or there might be something missing in that regard. And so I love these last two columns because they help to nuance our life to say, okay, I thought what was broken was, my daughter was acting out about something, but really, she's confused about what normal in our home is, and I need to be able to clarify that. So your ability to actually think through these four questions and your ability to be honest with these four questions um, is going to determine the traction with which you get as you look to begin to shape and change things. So here's what I would encourage you. I'd encourage you to be both honest and authentic, as well as to be hopeful as you do this, and thankful and gracious as you do this. All right? So I always talk about the idea that when you're creating community, you want to be able to be both authentic and also growing in your maturity. Not just one or the other, but both of those things. You have some places where you're incredibly authentic, but no one ever really gets better. You ever been in one of those small groups where, you gotta be authentic, and if ever your life is actually going well, you feel like you don't belong in the group. You got to make something up, about, hey, here's how my life's falling apart, because no one ever really gets better. It's just incredibly authentic, but there's no sense of maturity. Other kind of group is the group that, you're only sharing your successes, and so you never really act like there's anything wrong, and so it looks at first like it's a very mature group, and then you realize, well, everyone's just eventually just creating a false sense of self. And so even if things aren't going well, you just act like things are going well because no one's ever been vulnerable in it. Well, we don't want either of those. If you're authentic without mature, you end up at the end deteriorating into a sick kind of culture because you just always stay sick. You never actually get healthy. If you have this kind of sense of maturity, but you're never authentic, you end up creating a fake culture. We don't want either of those two things. Here's what we want. We want a healthy culture. And a healthy culture is determined by this. It's a place where I can be honest about my struggles, but I also don't have to hide my successes. You want to know what a healthy culture is, what a healthy life is? It's a healthy life when I can be honest about my struggles and I don't have to hide my successes. Both of those two things. Meaning that I can celebrate the things that are going well, and I can champion that, I can grow into more of that, and at the same time I can be honest about the things that aren't going well. And so I can do both of those things. Can I, I don't have to hide my successes, and can I be honest about my struggles? Make sense? So that's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 20 minutes now, and I want to give you 20 minutes to fill out your grid. I want you to get at least one thing, just at least, begin to go through every vocation and, look and at least ask the question in every box. You may not actually put something in every box, but I want you to at least ask the question and give yourself enough time to say, is there anything missing from my personal life? Is there anything confused in my personal life? Is there anything broken? Is there anything, that is going well? And what are those things? So you can do 20 minutes on your own. You don't have to stay in this room, by the way. I'll put 20 minutes, on my watch, and I'll give you a 5-minute wake-up call or a 5-minute warning call before we come back, and then a 2-minute warning call. So if you want to get out of this room, if you want to go outside or anything like that, you can do that. We'll do 20 minutes. Ready? Starting now. Go.